Welcome back to the video 2 of our series Secure AI Adoption Lifecycle. Now today we're going to talk about how we can technically protect the AI systems that our businesses are deploying or we may be adopting as cybersecurity to increase our efficiency. Now, before we get down to today's business, I just wanted a quick reminder of what this series is about and what is not. In this series, we will talk about how we can practically build the controls and use existing controls to really protect the AI systems and AI security, build our knowledge of fundamentals of AI security, and how we can use that, one, to protect the systems that the business uses, and two, what are the crossovers of cybersecurity. It is not a training course on how to use a Gen AI tool or how to use any tool for that matter, and it is not a product marketing. So any mention of the tools and stuff would be purely from an example perspective, right? And it's all my pure personal views, and it's not, this video is not sponsored. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, we all have been talking and discussing and kind of attending sessions, reading books about AI security. But at the end of the day, I guess in one way or another, we are all thinking about these three questions. How does it impact me? How does it impact my work? And what can I do? Now, while this video is about AI security, I think we are all asking the same three questions, whether we are in cybersecurity or not, around AI or any innovation for that matter. What is the impact and what can I do? What are the things that I can control, right? So let's see what we can do as cybersecurity professionals. Now, to connect these three questions to finding the answers, I thought a good way of doing this or good way of structuring this would be connecting back to the 7 cybersecurity control domains. Now, the teams in all organizations might be structured similarly or differently, but at the end of the day, we all kind of revolve around these 7 key control domains, right? And we have these 5 stages or 5 key objectives that we want to achieve while we work with the control domains. Now, if you are new or if this is the first video that you're seeing, then we do have another video talking about the details of control domains, what is inside them, and what you can do as a standard. And you can find that on our channel in week 5 of another series, which is around learning GRC in 12 weeks. But anyway, so let's get started. And if this is your first video, let's quick introduction about me is so if this is your first video, a quick introduction about me. I'm Priyanka Chatterjee. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for 20 plus years now, and I'm also the CEO of London School of CyberSecurity. I'm creating these videos as a way to give back to the community and to share my knowledge and experience, and with the hope that you can take some of the learnings from these videos and apply it in your career journey or apply it back to where you're working to make things better for you and for your organization. So without further delay, let's get started with access control. And before we get started with the control domains, a quick update or quick information about the format that we will do. For each of the control domains, we will look at some of the risks around that touch that particular domain and what kind of controls can we apply, which is essentially what answers the question, what can I do? So let's get started with access control. So in access control, if we look at the domain, the key risks that we are, or the access control people or professionals are supposed to handle is the authentication, authorization, and accounting, right? So when we talk specifically about AI systems, these are the 5 key risks that they need to be thinking about, or you need to be thinking about if you are working in access management or access control. The first is loss of user accountability when system accounts execute on behalf of users. Now think about how the AI systems are built, right? So most of the users, or at least where things are now, you would give a prompt to the system and the system functions would call the other system functions internally. Now, traditionally, that would be a system account. But here you have a very, I would say, seamless transfer between what a user is doing and what the system accounts are doing, right? So that's the first risk. How do we maintain the user's accountability? Then we could also have overprivileged system accounts, right? Now, privilege management is already a big risk that we worry about and we do a lot of things about in different organizations. But when it comes down to AI, because it needs to do so many different things, it can seem easy that you just give it a full access, but that can be a risk, right? Because then if that particular account is compromised, then gone is your system. Then the next risk we're talking about is privilege escalation via manipulating the prompt, right? So maybe we get so creative with the prompts that you're actually able to escalate your privileges as a normal user and can start acting as a more super user. The fourth risk is around data leakage. So data leakage when the LLM or the AI system responds, but also gives us information that we as a user are not supposed to see, right? Again, the final one is because one AI system might be used by different business functions, or if we are introducing AI system on backend operations system where different departments or different business functions do different things, then does it break down the segregation of duties? So that's a key question we need to ask, right? Does it break the maker checker concept? How do we maintain that? So let's look at the controls, what we can do to manage these exposed threats or risks. Now, for those 5 risks or threats, we have 5 controls, right? So that's my suggestion here. If you get anything else, feel free to put them in the comments so that I can update my own knowledge. Now let's look at the first control that we can talk about. So the first one is we have to tag all the system accounts with user identity. And we should aim at logging the prompt metadata. Yeah, not necessarily the prompt, or maybe we will look at it when we come down to incident response, but at least we need to be able to log the metadata of the prompts so that we can identify who's doing what. We have to map the user roles to what's an allowed LLM action. So me as Priyanka as a user should not be able to do what John as a super user or one of the developers or one of the main administrators might be allowed to do, right? And we should not be using the same system accounts for the calls either. Then we should now switch from a role-based access to or a user and role-based to system and role-based, right? What are the system accounts doing? We should start now segregating the system accounts based on roles to avoid a very broad and open permission. So now, for those who have been working on role-based access controls or role-based access, you need to now bring the service accounts or the system accounts in scope and see what each of these system accounts are able to do. Then comes the detection or accounting piece. We have to also monitor and alert on system account activities. A lot of organizations might not be monitoring system accounts because typically they are non-interactive. But in the case of AI, because a lot of things would happen between systems, right? It becomes more and more important to monitor and alert on system account activities. And finally, to maintain that segregation of duties or the make a checker concept, we need to make sure that the system accounts are also segregated. So that would be a smart way of maintaining the segregation of duties so that we know on whose behalf is that system call made or that system function is being operated, right? Now again, quick summary. For access control, key pieces, think about role-based system account. We used to have role-based user controls. Now we need to bring system accounts into scope. All right. So that's about access control. Let's move into network security. Now, network security, the good thing is there is a lot of the standard controls today can and will still apply to the AI regime or the AI world. But there are two key risks that we need to be looking out for. The first one is model exfiltration. So we talk about data exfiltration in today's world, but in addition to data exfiltration, we now have to worry about the model exfiltration as well. So the first one is model exfiltration. And how can it be achieved? Why is it a network security risk? Because maybe something that we can do by you enter in one zone and then you are able to take it out from another part of the network. Then comes the AI APIs. The API security is one of the kind of risks or cybersecurity threats that is increasing up on the ladder in the ranking pretty quickly. It's one of the top 3 to 5, if not more, if not the top. But when it comes down to AI, it becomes all the more important because of the scale, because of the speed, because of the dependence that because people will not see a lot of things happening in the background. So it's almost becomes the risk of out of sight, out of mind. So we need to make sure that the APIs that are being used by the AI systems, they are properly protected. Now let's talk about the controls. The controls, model exfiltration. Now very important. Now in AI, there are a couple of key components here. The first is training, then comes the inference. Inference means what is the AI model able to infer using its existing knowledge, right? But it is looking at new data set, but it is using its knowledge based on the training, right? So we need to make sure that the training and inference environments are segregated, okay? And it's really sad that it's 2025 and then I still come across organizations who do not have a properly segmented network. And if you are one of them or if you work for one of them, then if nothing else, please use this AI adoption as a starting point of segregating. Create a segment where you can segregate the training and the inference environments, right? Okay, next comes the egress controls, which is basically the traffic going out from the GPU clusters. Normally, we do not, in organizations, we only monitor the traffic the web traffic that goes out from the users to the internet, and purely from a compliance and good malicious sites versus not malicious sites, right? But when it comes down to AI systems and when we are talking about the GPU clusters or inference services, we need to monitor what's going out of them. Because why? We need to be able to catch if there's data being taken out of them, if their models are being stolen, if the inferences are being, or if someone is doing something else. So anything that is connecting from these GPUs outside the network, we need to be able to inspect and monitor. Okay, then if you have web application firewalls and API security solutions, start thinking about how can you protect the AI APIs and how can you bring in the concept of monitoring or protecting for LLM specific threats. Okay, and one of the existing controls that most of us do is encryption in transit, but it becomes more and more important when we are talking about AI systems, which is around data and model artifacts. Okay, if we are transmitting data, if we are transmitting any information about the models and stuff like that, make sure that the system to system connection is encrypted, even if both the nodes are hosted internally. Okay, but now we'll start seeing a nice combination of nice, not in as in nice, but a whole lot of combination of where one part of the system is hosted in your organization's cloud or data centers. And for example, the inference services might be hosted in a SaaS, or the training services might be hosted in SaaS. So things like that, we'll start seeing more and more hybrid deployments. And by hybrid, I do not mean data center and cloud. By hybrid, I mean your organization's network, including cloud and on-prem, and a SaaS model or an AI service provider's network. So that connection, it becomes more and more seamless. So you see what it is doing to our edge. There's no edge. Before we were saying the edge has expanded from data center to cloud. Now there's no edge, because now we're going from our cloud to everyone's cloud. So anyways, coming back to a summary of network security controls, think of zero trust. Focus on maintaining integrity. So the focus of your network security control should be to maintain the integrity of the traffic in transit, so that the functions that start from the source node to the destination node remain the same. It should not change in the middle, and it should not happen that I send a command X and it becomes command Y when it reaches the destination node. So those are the integrity controls. The ranking of the integrity controls for AI systems in network security, it becomes higher. An interesting part would be that all of us should be talking to our existing product vendors, because obviously everyone is jumping on the AI bandwagon, but be smart of what you are asking for, not what they are telling you. Okay, what you need, ask for that. Ask your web vendor, are you doing something for, are you going to inject some rules for LLM specific threats? If not, ask for that feature now. Okay, so that's about network security. Let's move on to the endpoint and device security. So if we talk about the endpoint and device, which means our end user machines, our phones, our laptops, and our iPads and things like that, and the servers, which comes under the device security. So I've tried to kind of combine them into one section, because they're kind of end of the day machines. Is just the scale of the machine. Now, the first risk is, again, model theft. Today, we talk about data theft from these machines. When it comes to AI, along with data, your model also becomes an asset that needs to be protected. Okay. Today, some organizations will say we need to protect the code, but that is either in the case of it's an intellectual property, or it is, or so that people do not tamper the code, right? But in the case of models, that model can, one, if it's an intellectual property, it's still a big risk. But if not, it can give a competitive advantage to your competitors if that model is stolen, or there's all sorts of crazy people in the world who could steal your model and try to do something crazy, right? Now we have unauthorized access to the GPU or the TPU infrastructure. Okay. Now GPU and TPU, what are these? These are the high power machines which are more suitable for running an AI model. Of course, we can run AI models on smaller scale laptops as well. I mean, you could run it, but obviously it takes time. But when we are talking about organization level scale, you do need a GPU or TPU infrastructure, right? Used for AI training. Now, why it is important? Because we all know that the decisions or the inferences that the AI does is as good as the training, right? Now, if someone has unauthorized access to these infrastructure, they can tamper with the training data, they can tamper with the model, they could inject bias or update the model code so that it kind of starts wonking up and does not behave as expected. Okay. Another control, runtime security. Now, I do know that some companies do use runtime security, but this is not something very commonly seen in the endpoint and device security world. But as we get more and more AI world, or we adopt more and more AI, we will start seeing containerized AI workloads because the whole world is moving to containers, right? Now, whether it's in the data center or in the cloud is already containerized for a while now. Now that trend is also coming down to the data centers, or it's already there in some places, but not as commonly seen. Now, when we do that, becomes very, very important to check the runtime security. Okay. Then comes the edge device compromise. Okay. If your devices are on the edge, for example, especially in the OT and IoT world, your edge devices will have some embedded models because of this infrastructure, because of the way things work and the models work. Those edge devices also needs to be protected. So if you are in an OT IoT world, one of your device types will be the edge devices. Okay, because you don't want your models to be exposed, because that's how the attackers are going to come and start planning attacks against you. It becomes more targeted. Okay, then comes your debug interfaces, remote shells, and residual model artifacts. Now, protecting the debug interfaces, remote shells is not new. Yeah, so if you are doing that in your non-AI infrastructure today, you just can extend that control. Maybe the techniques may look a little different, but you can extend that control to those AI systems. Now, residual model artifacts is something very unique to the AI, where once the model has run something, it's almost like if you like think of the temp directories, yeah. So, but you need to manage those temp directories or the temp directory situation in AI a lot more carefully, because you can still be leaking data, still leaking information about the models and things like that from those artifacts. Okay, now let's look at what kind of controls can we apply to manage these threats and risks around endpoint and device security. So here, there's a ton of things which are available today, which you could essentially extend to the AI infrastructure. Hardening is something that we all do today, yeah, and you should do the same for an AI one, okay? But the important part is, in an AI world, we should make sure that we have a way of hardware attestation. We need, because we will be depending more and more on these machines, and the amount of human eyes on the inputs and outputs will start reducing over time. We need to make sure that the hardware where we are installing these AI models are not compromised in the first place. Okay, so we all may have heard about the network devices where the ports and stuff, the cards, the firmware, the cards were compromised, and those appliances had to be taken out of a lot of networks especially in the American market. But in the case of GPUs or in the case of AI systems, this could be anywhere, right? And compromising the hardware would be a very easy way of basically opening a door to gain control of your machines, right? So let's make sure that we have a way of hardware attestation. It can also be called TPM attestation, okay, for the nodes hosting the models. If you are not already doing it, start exploring the kernel level hardening tools. Okay, now when we say hardening, a lot of organizations would limit themselves to services, to the modules and whatnot that runs in the machine. But when we talk about the AI systems, we should also take care of some kernel level hardening. Okay, now there are some tools that comes out of the box, okay, on a lot of the OS and stuff. So explore that. I've given some examples here on the screen, and but please do add those as part of your learning journey. Okay, now MFA goes without saying, the most talked about thing, Now you might be thinking, why did we add MFA in endpoint and device and not in access control? Well, MFA is that control where you could add in access control. MFA is kind of given, but when I talk about device and security endpoint controls, from that perspective, I want to make sure that you have MFA on SSH or RDP type access, okay? Especially on the training and inference servers. Because for the users, you would typically have an SSO based login, right? So the chances that MFA would be there for end user login would be much higher. But if you don't already have, please make sure that for these AI machines, you have MFA, multi-factor authentication, enabled for SSH and RDP access. Then encryption at rest. You may already be doing it. Make sure that you can extend it. Okay. And your EDR machines, your endpoint detection and response. And again, same as your WAF vendors, speak to your EDR vendors. Are they monitoring or are they including some kind of rules, some kind of features, capabilities to look out for LLM-based threats, okay, or threats that can impact LLM or behaviors that can impact LLMs much more than any normal code, okay? Now comes the container and AI runtime security. So here, I will always start with minimal base images, or people who are as old as me, they would know the term golden image, right? Important part that we should have apply signed container images. Not just a golden image or a base image, but also those should be signed and scanned. So you should be signing and scanning those images as you build, that you use to build the containers. Okay. Implement runtime detection. If you do not have that today, and if you are planning to adopt AI systems in your environment, make sure that you are thinking about the runtime threat detection. And if you are adopting an externally hosted SaaS based AI system, then you should be asking these questions to your SaaS provider. Okay. Okay. Next is the from a container perspective. If you're using Kubernetes, then the pod security controls. Now, over times, the terms have changed, but the requirements kind of stay the same. At some point, it used to be called pod security policies. Now, they're generally called pod security controls or things like that. But make sure that you have looked through those, and you can find that online on the internet, and you had actually applying it or asking your developers, asking your SaaS service providers to make sure that those are applied. So if you're thinking about what kind of questions I need to ask my SaaS providers, if we are adopting an AI system that is not developed in-house or not hosted in-house, then this is what you would need to do. Okay, and same goes for the people who are doing a risk assessment of these AI systems. Okay. And again, I would always say a lot of the controls that you may have today, you can extend. The mechanisms and techniques may look a little different because of the architecture, because of the underlying infrastructure, but the control types can be extended. And if you do not have a practical way of achieving that, think, how are you achieving that today? Who is providing you with that solution? So instead of going and spending time and effort in finding a new solution, maybe ask your current solution provider to help you achieve that. Okay. All right. The next two ones are remote and edge device controls. I talked about the OT and IoT. So the key pieces are definitely we need to disable the remote admin interfaces. Again, signed model execution. We should not let any codes just run, but there should be a way to verify that this code is maintained and not been tampered with. So we need to make sure that we have a way of signed model execution for these edge devices. And we should be able to collect the logs and telemetry. So if your OT and IoT system are not under monitoring today, then you would be in a bigger danger, or your detection capabilities will go much, much down as they become AI enabled, because it will happen today or tomorrow, right? Whether you do it or the vendors that are providing you these devices do it, it's just a matter of time. So start asking these questions today. Next comes model lifecycle controls. Model lifecycle controls is, we talked about the equivalent of temp directory, right? So think about those temporary training data, the logs, the checkpoints between the different models, okay, or the different nodes. So if there are those situations where that information is stored temporarily or needed temporarily, put it in the code or put it in your system checks that it should automatically purge those temp files. I'm just going to use the terms that we use in today's world, in the general tech world, so that you can draw parallels in the AI world as well. So just ask that. Now, whether you as an endpoint specialist or a server admin or a server security specialist can achieve and do something about all of this, maybe not, depending on how your organization is structured. You may have to collaborate and coordinate with other departments, other teams. For example, how do you make sure that the temp files or the temp directories are automatically cleaned? That's something that maybe we need to ask the developers to embed in the code. We need to ask the service providers to make sure that's happening. We ask this question to the providers who are saying that, oh, my system is AI enabled, right? Are you automatically purging this temp files, right? It could be training data, logs, model checkpoints, anything. The other key piece is data lineage. Now, in the non-AI world, the data lineage is more relevant and more important to understand where your data has gone and where your exposure points might be. Now, in the world of AI, where we are using AI to do a lot of the human tasks, it is not just the exposure, but it also, this data lineage also gives us visibility into who made or at what point what decision was made, right? Because if something has gone wrong and if we have to go back and investigate, we should be able to draw the complete picture and not just say, oh, let's go and find out what all functions ran and why it ran. HR was supposed to do this and finance was supposed to do that. Because in a world where human beings do the tasks, you could always go and ask them retrospectively. And we have a memory, we can recollect, and if we are truthful, we will be able to kind of build that lineage or build that picture for you. But when there is no human being in picture and the systems are making decisions on your behalf, you need to make sure that you understand what's moving where, which systems are connecting, what are the decision points, what happened, right? Because otherwise, you would not be able to trace any of the decision points, and that is not something where we want you to be. Okay, so that is around endpoint and device security. Let's talk about application security. Now, for application security, it's a big domain in itself. Now, there are a lot of the controls today which you can straight away lift and shift, obviously with slightly modified techniques. Now, a great place for you to start with is, if nothing else, go and learn about the Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, as we all fondly call it. Start with the top 10 for AI LLMs. That will help you learn what are the key things I should be looking at. If nothing else, I've created a small summary of this and I did do a post on my LinkedIn channel as well. So if you want to go and read a little bit more about that, you can go to my LinkedIn post and learn the summary, or I will include the link to this OS Top 10 in the description as well for this video. If nothing, just go and search OWASP Top 10 for AI LLMs. The title is right there on the screen for you. So you should be able to go and do a quick search. OWASP has fantastic resources. It'll give you details, what you should be looking at, and how you can prevent and control. All right, so I don't want to beat around the bush. This is the best place for you to start if you are in application security and you're asking the question, what can I do? Okay. Next comes the data protection and privacy risks. Now, obviously, in today's non-AI systems, we have the risk of data leakage, risk of unauthorized access, privacy, right? Who is seeing what, and has the person given us permission to use that data for that particular purpose, right? So those are kind of the principles that we go around. But in the case of when we talk about AI systems, we are opening the prompt bar as another window to interact with the data. Okay, so the privacy concerns or the requirements remain the same, right? As you can learn from the various regulations like GDPR and for California CCPA and things like that. But for AI systems, prompt leakage, okay, is a new type of threat or a exposure, okay, because you can give a prompt and the system could potentially return sensitive data in the response. Then comes model memorization. The model may be able to remember the sensitive inputs, and this is where I would request you that as an individual, as tempting as it may be, please do not upload any of your sensitive information onto AI systems, okay, to make your life a little bit easy, and especially not your bank accounts. Please, bank account statements. Yes, the accountants do charge a few $100s for your tax filing and stuff. And if you have not done it, I would not use AI systems for my accounting purposes yet. Okay, unless that is the tool that is meant just for that. I would not use the likes of ChatGPT or Claude to be my accountant. Then comes hallucinated leakage. Now, obviously, prompt leakage is one thing, but what if the AI system is hallucinating and I'm asking questions about me and it starts telling me information about you? That's not right, right? Or I ask a question, tell me about Priyanka Chatterjee, and starts telling me about Priyanka Chopra. I'm asking about me, right? So those can be another data protection and privacy risk. Hallucination, inference errors, those things needs to be taken care of. And again, shadow AI usage. This is where your end users would be leveraging the publicly or commercial tools, commercial AI enabled tools, right, for their work. Okay, now this is where you need to think as an enterprise if it makes sense for you to deploy a private deployment of the likes of Claude, ChatGPT, or the other LLMs, or is it okay to allow the end users to use these tools for your corporate purposes. Okay, now obviously I know the users are going to use it, and that's kind of the direction where things are heading to, but we need to, for data protection and privacy, saying an absolute no is not going to work. So we need to still figure out what are the absolute no-nos. For example, do not upload customer data, do not ask customers for your bank account details. So I'll give an example here. When we first saw the onset of these chatbots, right? Now, chatbots are not AI per se. Okay, they are not. Now, a lot of people are calling chatbots as AI. Not necessarily. And they are a little intelligent, but they are not necessarily a full-blown AI system. But anyways, I'm digressing. So when the first chatbots came into play, you would see that the end users or customers would just say, here's my bank account. I'm trying to access this, but I'm not able to access. Can you help me with this problem, right? But then the banks started to learn that it's not good to store the bank account details or the other details, the transaction details, the private information on the chatbots, because they don't necessarily control all the different pieces of that algorithm. And plus it becomes much more harder to maintain it just by capturing that they had to do a lot more for their public website, because the chatbot would be available on their public website. Normally when it's a public website, the need for controls is a lot less, sorry, than if you are using a confidential system, right? But the moment you put a chatbot and users start putting their bank account details, their date of birth, and such, your website suddenly went from private to confidential. So that did not make sense. So now you would see at the start of every chatbot, they will say, please do not put private information on that. Anyway, so back to our AI systems. Same goes for shadow AI usage. The risk is that users can still go and do that. Then we have the lack of contextual output filtering. So maybe I'm asking information about Priyanka in a certain context, right? For example, a question could be, tell me about the conferences that Priyanka has spoken in, what kind of topics has she talked about, and yada yada, right? But the AI might just keep saying that, okay, Priyanka has attended these 5 conferences and she flew there and this is the airline she took, and thinks that I don't need the other words to know. But the system is not filtering for the context, right? So those things can also happen. Okay. Now, what's the key risk? Obviously, it's for data protection and privacy. It's almost the primary risk is your end user privacy impacts, plus the data protection risks that you have today. It just blows up in terms of scale, in terms of the impact levels. Okay. Now, what can we do? The first thing is, where possible and as much possible, when you pass the input from the prompt to your LLM, try to redact or mask any sensitive data, sensitive fields, right? But then that means that you need to embed the logic of detecting what is sensitive data as well. Okay. Then you need to have a context-based privacy technique. Okay. And that is something you need to embed as part of your training, the model. So at the time when you're training the model, right, the data that you give, you need to embed the differential privacy techniques so that the model does not remember any sensitive data. So even if I say as a user that here's my bank account details, the model should be forgetting that. Okay. And one thing that we can do and we must do, even if we are not doing anything else technically, is please spread user awareness. Please make the users aware about prompt hygiene, what they should not put on the prompts, what are the good and bad practices, because users are very simple people, right? We all love convenience, we all love easy lives. So if there's a tool, and there will be a tool which will help us make our life better, make our life easier, as a normal user, my first instinct is to give the tool all my information, right? Hand over all my information, but that's not the right way, especially in the case where I am handling an organization's information. So please focus on, if you are in cybersecurity and if you have not done it, if you are in GRC and watching this, then please add a prompt hygiene in your security awareness calendar. If you're not in GRC, please speak to your GRC people or your head of cybersecurity or chief information security officer to have a program where you talk about prompt hygiene for the users. Okay. Okay. Coming down to the detection pieces, you should look for any leakage indicators, right? So we do look at the DLP, or the data leakage prevention or protection controls for the non-AI systems, but we need to extend that to our AI systems as well. Okay. And again, if you have a DLP tool, please request for that feature, if not already there, to monitor for leakage indicators. Okay. For that, you need to be looking for the input and the output from a particular LLM. Okay. Then speak to your developers or speak to your service provider. Make sure that the model is context aware and it is filtering the output for the context. Okay. Interesting part. In the world of LLMs, you would have a question and an answer pair. So it's like a prompt and response. So what did I ask? What did the system tell me? Right? So it's a prompt and a response pair. So you need to really log both, log and audit both. It's not enough to capture one or the either, but you need to capture both so that you can, with confidence, say that I have control over my privacy, and these filtering, the hygiene, and differential privacy techniques, they're all working, or the reduction or the masking is really working. But you need to be able to log both the prompt and the response pairs. And again, something that we say widely, even in the non-AI world, is where possible, please use synthetic data for training the model, right? Don't give it the actual customer data. Build your model, train your model using synthetic data. If not, jumble up the data. Okay. And make sure that you cannot use that test data to connect back to a user. Okay. Please take care of non-production controls for the data, especially for the training stage. Okay. Now, moving on to incident response. In incident response, there's kind of three key areas when we think about AIs. Okay. So the first type of incidents would be where you're abusing your model, how your model is behaving, whether it has been compromised, the model itself is compromised, or something is happening by misuse of public LLMs. Okay. Now, there will be a lot of tools developed in-house, but they leverage open source LLMs, right? So that abuse of that models would be one type of incident that you need to think about when you're thinking about, okay, what more can I adopt and adapt in the world of incident response. So the first is abuse of models. The second is where someone is stealing the model, not just the data, right? And also where someone may steal the prompt history, or your prompt history is exposed, right? And the response. Because we are saying that we have to log that for data and privacy protection and privacy perspective, we need to log the prompt and response pairs, but make sure that when it is transiting or when it is stored, it is stored securely. Okay, so that's your second type of incidents you need to think about. And then the third one is where the breaches involve, it impacts your data, your operations, but using an external or consumer grade AI enabled tools. Now, consumer grade tools would be off the shelf tools, the commercial tools that you may also use as individuals, not necessarily as an organization, but breaches that touch those other tools. Okay, so there would be three use cases or three sort of categories that you need to think from an incident response perspective. Okay. Now, an important thing for you to think as or consider as part of your brainstorming sessions is there something that needs to be different when you're investigating an internal AI system or a public or consumer grade AI tool? So those are the things you need to think about when you're brainstorming. What more should I or can I do from an incident response perspective? So if you're a security operations center manager or a SOC manager, SOC analyst, start talking about these key new areas of incidents. What can you do? Well, if you have your SIEM and SOAR playbooks, make sure that it can detect an AI model misuse. How would you be able to detect that the AI model has been compromised? Okay, and it's not just an update to the model. So you need to make sure that you are monitoring that. Then you have got the normal access logs, the tokens, the output anomalies, those things needs to be logged and monitored. Okay, important piece. We talked about this in access control as well. The system accounts, we need to turn up the heat on auditing and monitoring what's being done by the non-human or the system accounts. Okay, then comes, I did talk about the playbooks, right? But we did not talk about what necessarily in the playbooks. So first we said the AI model misuse, but obviously connecting it back to the risks that we just talked about, we need to talk about was there an abuse of the prompt? Is a user kind of trying to trick the system by using really clever prompts and make the system respond in a way that it should normally not, or it is violating your policies? Okay, what is really an anomaly in your world, right? So you need to make sure that it is embedded within this or up in the updated playbooks. Then the next part is the model exfiltration, the data exfiltration from these AI systems. Are you monitoring? Are you monitoring the response flows or the response workflows and seeing if someone is misusing the data, the models, or the intellectual property, right? And that is where the power of the AI would be, that where if you have intellectual property, you're just increasing your power by using these AI machines, right? So again, another use case for your brainstorming session if you're working in a SOC or an incident response area. Finally, if you are in the management, or if you are responsible for incident response, make sure that you have an AI specific incident use case in your tabletop exercise. So the next time you do your tabletop exercise and if you are on an AI adoption path, make sure that you have a use case where you take one of these incident types or the risks that we talked through and you run through a tabletop or simulation exercise. Okay. Now, one key question for you to think operationally is, yes, we're talking about we should be logging all of these other different stuff, but what does it mean from your indexing capacity? Because I'm aware that some tools do charge you by indexing, some might be just how expensive the infrastructure is. Now, there's also talks about some of the leading sort of storage vendors increasing their prices a whole lot, just a change in the market. So think about those things as you increase the amount of logging. Yes, this is important, but you need to also think, what does it mean from your storage that is connected to your SIEM, SOAR, okay? And how can you increase your capacity? I would not say capability just. Of course, you need to look at the capability to look at the AI based attacks, but what does it mean operationally from your SIEM SOAR costs, especially purely from a storage perspective? Are you able to add more storage on a regular basis? Okay, so that's an interesting point for you to think about and consider purely from an operational perspective. Okay, so the last control domain is business continuity and resilience. Now here I want you to think about certain scenarios. The scenario is, the first is, what happens if the model is corrupted or deleted, right? So right now in the non-AI world, ransomware is the top attack, top risk, right? But in the world of AI, ransomware will still be one of the top risks. But apart from that, what if your model is corrupted? What if someone just goes and deletes it? I no longer need to encrypt it. I just go and boom, delete it. And then my whole system just comes crashing, right? What if my models start behaving and the number of inaccuracies is very, very high and it starts impacting the business decisions? How would we recover from that, right? Because we need to maintain a balance, right? Yes, we need efficiency, but the business decisions need to have some level of accuracy. So that's another scenario of the risk from a business continuity and resilience perspective. The third one is, what would my supply chain would look like, or will there be a disruption to that if I am depending on an external AI model, right? For example, if I'm using an open source AI model and suddenly there's a problem with it, how do I handle that? Or if I'm using a SaaS-based AI solution and that has a problem, how do I handle that? How do I manage that? The key question remains, how fast can we detect and how fast can we put a stop to the problem from spreading? Because see, if you have to be resilient, you should be able to control the problem, right? If your whole organization is impacted, it's going to be super difficult. But if you catch those problems early on, then you may be able to just ring fence the problem to a part of the organization, and then recovery will be much, much faster. So think about these three scenarios when you think about AI systems. So question is, what can we do? So let's look at some of the controls, the 5 key controls or 5 key control areas that we can look at to manage those scenarios that we just talked about. The first one is, again, we need to take regular backups of the models, data, and pipeline configurations. Okay, now we all have our backup systems in place, but just make sure that you have a way of versioning the models and the backups, and you can kind of trace back to what versions have been backed up, because the models are very important, especially if you have trained it, your model is secure, then you can give it new data for new inferences and new decision points. So in terms of priority, I feel that from a backup perspective, keeping a safe copy of your models is very, very important, right? And please do not store it on the same machine. Okay, store it somewhere externally, and if possible, maintain an offline copy as well, especially if it is an AI system that does some critical business processes. Okay, and what are the pipeline configuration? Which system is calling what from a workflow perspective and business decisioning perspective? So you need to be able to recover those pipelines. It should not go from HR to, it should not become HR finance operations to HR operations finance. Then the decisioning would be reverse. Okay, very important. Make sure that those are, you are checking for the integrity of these models, backups, and everything. Okay. A very, very important thing that I see a lot of traditional non-AI systems kind of forget about is rollback, fallback, right? If you have rolled out a model and it does not behave in a way that you expected it to, you should be able to fall back or roll back to a previously good known version, right? So you see how it is kind of adding up. You need to have a versioning, integrity checks. You need to have a way of rollback slash fallback, so that if your new model fails, you should be able to go back to your previously working model and at least manage it to a great extent. Okay, again, coming back to your business continuity and resilience pieces and incident response, you need to plan for what happens if this AI system starts acting up or does not act as is expected. How are we going to run it? who are going to be involved, who are the key stakeholders that can still make those decisions, still make those business processes work. Okay, so if you are thinking of 100% of an AI dependent operations, then you need to figure out a way or ask yourself, should I still have one or two people for business continuity perspective, or should I have a contract with an external provider who could come in and do these tasks exactly, who are trained to do these tasks in the case my AI workforce fails to deliver. Okay, and again, the final control on business continuity and resilience is we need to monitor if the word is called drift, and we have to check thresholds for any retraining triggers, because see, the system is great, it's efficient, but it has a learning curve. Just like us human beings, it also has a learning curve. Sometimes it learns as expected, sometimes it doesn't. So we need to be able to monitor and measure what is the deviation from the expectation and what is my threshold when I need to say, okay, I think we need to go back and retrain, right? Or we need to go and adjust some of the parameters. Now here, to give you a starting point, I've included some of the metrics or some of the KPIs that you could potentially look at monitoring if you are adopting an AI system. Okay, now these may be more relevant for those working on the AI systems and not necessarily cybersecurity, but because I know that cybersecurity function is quite keen on adopting AI systems to make your operations more efficient and more smoother, right? And less of a burnout. And hence, I think this would be very, very important even for us to monitor apart from the security metrics. So these are some of the metrics that you would eventually start becoming part of your operational metrics, not just uptime, downtime, or your CPU monitoring, CPU and memory monitoring, but this is how your model is behaving. Because based on this, your incident detection or your response mechanism or your other analytics can go right or wrong. So first is data drift. Your population is stable or not, you need to do that. Okay, now you can go and learn these terms if you are really technically keen, or if you are buying a solution off the shelf solution, then you need to ask your product vendors that they need to give you an operational dashboard which at minimum monitors these 5 metrics from an operational perspective, because the efficiency, the accuracy of your system will depend on these metrics, or this is how you would measure how efficient or effective your system is actually working on. All right, so with that, we come to the end of this session. I hope you learned something new. I hope you can take one of the domain that you are from or you can connect to and take at least 1 or 2 actions out of this session and apply it and take back to your organization and start talking about how you could potentially start leveraging those things. And if nothing else, the GRC team, please share this with your GRC team so they can start including these questions as part of their risk assessment. Okay. And the one pro tip that I would leave you with this session is, yes, we talked about the security risk, security controls, but we are at a time when the AI adoption has already blown and we don't know who is using what. Okay, that's just the reality. Now, it sucks that I'm saying this on a public video, but that's the reality, that our users are already using AI-enabled tools. There are tools that the businesses are already probably buying and has not told us. So a smart way of doing this is, while you develop your approach, while you learn more, reach out to your CAB, the Change Advisory Board, and ask them to add one basic question. Does this change involve enabling or updating any artificial intelligence components? So what this will do is, even if you're not doing anything from a control perspective yet, This will help you identify where your exposure is increasing. So as you learn, as you start improving your policies and your frameworks and the controls, right? You can go back to the answer to these questions and say that, okay, these are the places where we actually adopted AI, or AI got injected, or we had a system and it got updated. So let's now look at how we can start managing the risks for these known assets. Okay, because the problem that we are going to face here is going to be the inventory of AI enabled or AI systems. Now, without knowing where our exposure is, it's going to be super hard to manage the threats, right? And if you have a technical way of discovering it, well done, right? But those solutions are also evolving. Okay, if you know of a tool that you like, please let me know in the comments, so maybe I can learn something as well. But until then, this is a very, very simple way of starting to collect information about what tools or what systems have an AI component to that. And because I'm hoping that most systems get onboarded or get deployed with some kind of change request or an assessment request. And maybe also we should ask procurement to ask the same question as well for systems that you're buying new or systems that are being renewed, right? So I would say that start asking this basic question. So with that, this is me, Priyanka Chatterjee, saying thank you so much for staying with me for this long, and hopefully you take some learning from this and take one or two steps back to your environment, and it helps you improve your security posture and helps you with a more secure adoption of AI within your environment. This is me, Priyanka Chatterjee, saying thank you so much and bye bye. I'll see you next week with where we talk about AI systems and risk governance. Thank you so much and take care. Have a good day, good evening, good night.